Imagine being an NFL fan. You're at home. It is November. Life is good. And the next thing you know, your NFL team is gone. That's how fast it can happen. And in November of 1995, that's exactly what happened in a little town called Cleveland. We're going to tell you all about it.
Welcome in to Spin Zone, Power, PR, and the NFL. I'm Colin Cronin, and I am delighted to be joined, as always, by my friend, colleague, and co-host, Mike Carmelini. Mike, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing wonderful, as always. I love this subject, and I'm super excited about our special guest and finally breaking out the Spin Zone Time Machine. Isn't that great? This is a special little segment we're going to have, hopefully more often. I hope you guys like this. Colin, can you explain what this time machine is all about to the millions of listeners out there in the NFL world?
Yes, it is not Hot Tub Time Machine. It is Spin Zone Time Machine. And it is when we go back in time and we take a look at maybe some of the more infamous stories from league history. And as you teased at the opening, Mike, we have a particularly interesting one today where we are going to look at one of the more controversial moments, I think, in league history. There have been quite a few, but we're going to dig into the chaos that surrounded the Cleveland Browns move to Baltimore, the spin, the fallout, and I suppose how it maybe still shapes the league even in 2025.
Yeah, and the Cleveland move isn't alone. Like, this has happened more than maybe some people realize, but we are talking about the Cleveland Browns, Art Modell, Paul Tagliabue, all that today. And I think to do that, we should probably bring in our good friend, Mr. Zach Segars of KOA Radio and Let's Talk Broncos. Zach, welcome to the Spin Zone. It's great to see you again, my friend. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to be joining you guys here. Glad to be talking about this. This is a topic that got me into the business of sports media, so near and dear to my heart. The Browns used to be one of my favorite teams, emphasis on used to be. People might be able to figure out why it is past tense. And then I've got my themed hat on today, rocking my Quebec Nordiques hat. Go Avs. So covered my bases.
Yeah, well done, and it's great to have you. I know that this this Cleveland Browns move, I love that this is the one that kind of got you in the business, because I know that you did a lot of writing, and then you're a great writer. A lot of people out there read your work, and we're lucky to have you. But I did find it interesting that so many teams have moved, yet there are a few that really kind of cut deep. Now, I think the Baltimore Colts, Indianapolis Colts is probably maybe the prime example of that, but maybe not. Maybe the Cleveland Browns betrayal, we'll get into all that, is at least a close second, right? This was a big one.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest. I think it changed the landscape of this whole situation, relocation, forcing cities to pay absurd amounts of tax money for stadiums. I mean, the Cleveland Browns were an iconic NFL franchise, as I'm sure we'll unpack, but they were one of the maybe not Tiffany franchises, because they didn't have the success of the Steelers or Packers or Cowboys, but they were one of those iconic brands. And if you go to the pre-Super Bowl era, they were the dominant dynasty, the most dominant dynasty really we've still ever seen to this day. They go to 10 straight championship games. They win 7 of them. Just like crazy. The Chiefs just went to 4 straight and won 2, which was bonkers. But like that's nowhere near what the Browns accomplished when they were first coming up. So, anyways, they this iconic franchise, and when Art Modell was able to move them to Baltimore, which is what happened. The new Cleveland Browns are an expansion team. I think there's a lot of people that don't know that. When he was able to move them to Baltimore, I think it gave owners around the NFL a lot more leverage. If you look at the history of NFL stadiums, there are very few stadiums around now that were made before 1995. Almost the overwhelming majority are older than 1995. And now we're even seeing those ones from 1995 and beyond being replaced by new stadiums in their own right. And a lot of those older ones are Lambeau Field, Soldier Field, ones that haven't gotten torn down for obvious historic reasons. What this did was it changed what owners can do to leverage cities to pay absurd tax money for their stadiums. So shout out to the Waltons while we're on it.
Yeah.
Zach, you mentioned, I suppose, the fact that the Browns have, one of the teams of the NFL. But if we go back to maybe set the scene, because that early success and then something of a fallow period, but the period before, the move begins, the talk begins. The Browns are pretty successful at that time. I mean, as a Broncos fan, we knew them well, but around the league, I mean, the dog pound was talked about. I've had the good fortune to talk to some former Broncos players who talked about going up to Cleveland and what it was like to play there, and how passionate the fans were. They'd stay outside hotels all night. They'd use fireworks, noise, do whatever it took. And this is a team that went to AFC championship games in 87, 89 and 90, or 87, 88 and 90. Can you maybe set the scene a little bit for people who are unfamiliar with the Browns, who maybe know the Browns in more recent times as kind of the laughing stock of the NFL? That wasn't the case. And it certainly wasn't the case in the years preceding this move.
No, the Browns are, I don't know, maybe not the Yankees or the Celtics because they have the most respective titles in their leagues, but I think they are similar to like what the Celtics are to the NBA, where they are the founding fathers of so many different ideas. Paul Brown integrated, who the Browns are named after. He was so one, just to set the stage for how beloved the team was. The Browns were named after Paul Brown, who was like Ohio's Paul Bunyan. Ohio's such a football state. He becomes a high school coach. He was a teacher. I forget what he taught, but he was a teacher. Becomes the high school football coach in Massillon, Ohio. Creates what some football historians consider some of the greatest high school football teams ever. Several players that make it all the way to the pros. I think it's like 1912, 1913. Or no, it must have been 1920 something. Doesn't matter. So it gets his start there and just has this incredible high school dynasty. Eventually, Ohio State University woos him, and he goes to coach the Buckeyes. He establishes Ohio State as a football powerhouse. What we know Ohio State to be now, like, yes, plenty of other coaches have built upon that legacy, but the foundation was laid by Paul Brown. He wins them their first national championship. World War II breaks out. He's in like he's coaching some sort of Army Naval Academy league, because everyone's in the draft. He wins that championship for whatever side thing. He goes back to coaching Ohio State. Every pro team wants him, and he keeps staving it off. This expansion team in the AAFC, a startup rival to the NFL, woos him to coach their team. And he's such an Ohio icon, so beloved. He was not the owner of the team. His family owns the Cincinnati Bengals, which is a whole different story. But that's the Brown family. They stole their original uniforms from the Browns and then just put the word Bengals on the side of the helmet, but same colors. And sorry, I love this team so much and the history so crazy. But but they woo him to coach their team. He integrates the NFL before Jackie Robinson ever plays for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He creates the aforementioned dynasty I talked about, 10 championships in a row. It starts in the AAFC. It ends as they're an NFL team. The two leagues merge. He's responsible for the 49ers being in the NFL as a result, and the Colts being in the NFL as a result, because those were original AAFC teams who merged with the NFL in large part because of the Browns' success. He invented the idea of studying game film, of having full-time coaching staffs, of having playbooks, of having face masks on a helmet, of a training camp in the summer, basic play concepts too, the running back draw is a Paul Brown invention. You could go on and on. The forward pass he helped popularize in the NFL. He, like Walter Camp, maybe not invented, but was like the founding father of football. And Paul Brown picked up that baton and ran with it. So the Browns had this proud legacy. They did have some up and down years, but in the 80s with Marty Schottenheimer, it gets reestablished. They go to several AFC championship games. And not only do they go to them, I mean, Broncos fans will be familiar with the drive. You know, they're incredibly close. And the drive only sent that game to overtime, if I'm remembering correctly. You know, incredibly close to winning that game and getting a Super Bowl trip for the first time in franchise history. You have the fumble right there too, which I think in many ways you could argue was even closer to a Super Bowl trip for the Cleveland Browns. So they had an incredible run. They were starting to reestablish their dominance. It starts to tail off towards the end of the Schottenheimer era. He's fired. We're in the early 90s. They hire Bill Belichick to be their head coach, and Nick Saban is hired by Belichick to be their defensive coordinator. Belichick's like a Ben Johnson on the defensive side of the ball, I think would be a good analog. He's revolutionized defense with what he's doing for the New York Giants. They've been the best defense in the league. They've won Super Bowls. He finally takes a head coaching job after being a hotshot coordinator for a few years. It's with the Cleveland Browns, and he slowly starts building them into an AFC power. At this same time, the city owned the stadium. I need to find the original name here. It was something Municipal Stadium. I'll look it up in a second. But the city of Cleveland owned the stadium, and it was shared by at the time the Cleveland Indians and the Cleveland Browns. And it was an old stadium. It was in bad shape. They did need a new stadium. And Cleveland did not want to. Modell pretty much wanted the city of Cleveland to fund the stadium with taxpayer money, but he wanted, this is the owner of the Browns, he wanted to own the rights to the stadium so he could profit off any profits the stadium made. And understandably, the city wasn't so gung-ho on that plan. They didn't think the Browns would be allowed to relocate. They kind of stared Cleveland down. Bill Belichick builds the Browns. They're starting to build into a power. In 1995, Sports Illustrated picks them to make it out of the AFC and represent the conference in the Super Bowl. I think it would have been Super Bowl 29. So just to establish, good team picked by Sports Illustrated to make it all the way to the Super Bowl. They start that year, I think 2-1 or something. And then in week 4, it's announced that the team's moving to Baltimore. And understandably, that deflates everything. The team goes down the tubes and wind up becoming the Ravens. But we can. I know I just talked for a really long time, but man, I could go. I've written manifestos about this team.
You're going to have to. Yeah, that's okay. So I guess I've already learned something. So I just always assumed that Art Modell moved the Browns from Cleveland because of what we did to him and as the Broncos did to him in '87, and I guess again in '88. So I guess that's not true. So it was, or at least it was more than that, is what you're saying. It wasn't just that.
It was money. It was a lot of money. You know, like you look at again, the deal he wanted is a sweetheart deal, right? Like we
Yeah.
can all understand why an owner of a sports team would want that. It doesn't cost me anything, and I can just sit back and like reap profits for years on end. Like that's awesome. That's great. Or at least no upfront costs. He'd be in charge of, I guess, maintaining it, but it's a very profitable endeavor. That's not like boohoo him.
Right. And the term I hear thrown around, I don't know it exactly, but I'm sure you guys will. It's like public money with private profits or something like that. And that's just dirty pool. That's what he wanted. He didn't want the risk or to spend the money, but he wanted the money back.
The reason he got it is because you had a pained city, a city heartbroken over the midnight departure of their beloved Baltimore Colts, who in their own rights was a Tiffany franchise. I mean, Johnny Unitas and the Baltimore Colts are in the greatest game ever played, quote unquote. So that city wanted a football team back so badly, and the opportunity presented itself. And they, even though it was slimy, even though it was probably not a great deal for the average citizen who wasn't overly invested in football, Baltimore jumped on it. And now you have the Baltimore Ravens and the expansion Cleveland Browns.
And Zach, you talked about the fact that the stadium had kind of fallen into disrepair. There's the fact that Cleveland itself was looking at ways to improve the stadium. I mean, they may have been fighting with Modell, but they had introduced a sin tax, as they called it. So they're making moves to try to keep the Browns there. For fans, was there a sense for fans that this could really happen? Was the thinking, hey, this is brinksmanship, and Art is going to blink first and they won't actually move? Or did they know this was a real possibility? Or were fans completely blindsided by this?
I think there was definitely some knowledge it was a possibility. I think there probably was a lot of denial. I think it was largely, this isn't going to happen. I mean, it was a surprise. It was done in the shadows. It was announced. It wasn't like we just saw with the Broncos in Burnham Yards. And obviously there wasn't any discussion about the Broncos leaving Denver, but we knew the different sites they were looking at and whatever. This was done in the shadows. Modell was making demands and I think holding the city hostage. And so I'm sure, the Colts thing hadn't been that far ago. I mean, about a bit, not quite a decade before, I think 7-8 years. So I'm sure people were aware that it was on the table, but I think largely because it was done kind of as an ambush. I think a lot of people didn't see it coming. And, I think as most people will see in their fan bases, there's a desire to want to believe the best is true, even if evidence is mounting to the contrary.
I'm definitely old enough to remember, but I remember not thinking. I thought it was just your typical power play, and it was all threats, and there was no way Cleveland and Art Modell wasn't going to work this out. Like I just never thought that was going to happen. I thought for sure that they would make it happen. Colin, did you kind of feel that way, or were you thinking it could go?
For us, it was such a strange concept on this side of the world. Like here, teams just don't get to uproot, and whether no matter the sport. I mean, particularly in Ireland, obviously it's very tied to your county with our Gaelic games. But if we talk soccer in England, teams just don't get to move. I mean, there is relegation. So if an owner isn't putting in the money, or they have a fight with the local council, they're just going to drop through the divisions. So the whole concept of a team relocating, it was so alien. Now, obviously, having learned more about the Colts and Baltimore, and that is something that we will definitely dig into in a future episode. It's very different stateside, and their franchises. So Manchester United could, if the owners wanted to decamp, they just couldn't do that. It is not possible to do. Whereas that is something that you can do in the US. So very different model, and that's what makes it kind of so interesting to see, especially as Zach has outlined. This was such a storied franchise. Zach, maybe if we, because the thing Mike and I are interested in, the thing this show is really about is the media narratives and how those play out. If we look at this, and I suppose, you as somebody who works in the media, what way did this kind of play out? Can you talk us through that? Because obviously you had competing narratives, right? You had Cleveland, you had Baltimore, you had local media in both, and then you had national media. So do you have kind of any insights into what this was like, and who won the PR war?
I mean, I think it depends on who you ask, right? I think people in Baltimore, I think it's honestly perfect timing we just did this. Baltimore just scheduled their 30th anniversary of the Ravens celebration game against the visiting Cleveland Browns. And they painted their end zones all special to be like they were painted for their first season. And, I think the football media has a surprising number of Browns people. And I think you'll hear sometimes their disdain for the Ravens come up. Mark Sessler of, I think it's the Call podcast now, comes to mind as someone who's loudly been anti-Ravens for their robbery of the Cleveland fan base. I think there would be more of a real rivalry there if you didn't immediately have the Steelers and Ravens rivalry, right? The Browns were an expansion team that was wildly unserious. The Ravens, with the Browns' talent, like, you think about the foundation that was being built there. Bill Belichick is fired as part of the relocation, but like, they were building something special there. This great team moves to Baltimore. Everyone in Baltimore is thrilled. Everyone in Cleveland is wildly jilted. And then in terms of narratives, I think you see nationally, there's a sense of apathy. I referenced it earlier, but a lot of people don't know the Cleveland Browns aren't the original Cleveland Browns. I've that, especially in my generation, I've had that conversation so many times. It's just, I think no one knows that this historic franchise was even stolen from the city. And they let the records and all that, the franchise history was meant to be retained in Cleveland. Sorry, I'm jumping around. The apathy, I think, is all lodged in this agreement the NFL came to allow the Browns to leave. And that was that Modell would get his way. He'd get to move the team to Baltimore, and the Browns would get one of the upcoming expansion teams. This was a period where the NFL was growing from 28 to 32. You had the Panthers, Jaguars, Texans, and the Browns all joined the league around this time. So they knew there were these expansion teams coming down the pike, and they promised Cleveland would get one of the next batch. Carolina and Jacksonville started in 95. Those had already been established. So they go, in 1999, you'll get your Browns back. Now, they've never been able to build back to what they were. Imagine if the Ravens were in Cleveland. Like, it makes more sense when you consider that franchise's proud history. Like, the Ravens win the Super Bowl in 2000. If you just think about Browns history in the 80s, they're a power. In the 60s, in the 50s, in the 40s, they're a power. And since 2000, they've been a power. They've just been in Baltimore, and they've been called the Ravens. But anyways, so the NFL makes this deal, and I think you have apathy because it's like, oh, well, the city gets to keep their legacy and history and everything. They just went 4 years without football, and Baltimore is happy. And the only people that really aren't happy is the city of Cleveland, which is by no means a media mecca. Like, unless you've got LeBron James there, sports media is not really focused on the city of Cleveland. And even when LeBron James is there, they're not really focused on the Browns.
They were the local media was very obviously anti Art Modell. It was a betrayal. It was portrayed that way. It was theft. So you're right. It really depends on where the coverage was. Certainly, the people in Baltimore and the people that cover sports in Baltimore were a little more, let's just say, understanding of taking sides with Art Modell. It was definitely reported two different ways, and I know like ESPN and that ilk, there was a lot less that time, and of course we probably need to talk about that too. This is before Twitter and before .coms, I think, or about the same time, but this was probably covered three different ways. This was covered very harshly in Cleveland. I mean, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Art Modell, when he passed away in 2012, he was put in the Hall of Fame. And to celebrate that, the citizens of Cleveland burnt his statue down, or tried to burn his statue down in Cleveland. So if the local media and the people living there are pretty much on the same page, that was a PR war that Cleveland, I think, won in Cleveland, that Baltimore somehow won in Baltimore, and the national spin was, I think, just kind of rode both sides of that fence as best they could and tried to come out of it with, I don't know if it's, maybe it is apathy, but I think they were trying to like placate everybody involved, if I remember that correctly. That's the way it seemed to me.
I think you're right. And by the way, screw Art Modell. I mean, if I have the platform to say it, there have been efforts to put him in the Hall of Fame. I'm not familiar with the fire story, but as recently as 2023, he was, I think, a semifinalist in the contributor category. Canton, Ohio, where the Hall of Fame is located, is very near Cleveland, and Cleveland has been and I mean, a lot of Cantonites are Browns fans. They've been very vocal in their disdain for Art Modell and their desire to not have him in Canton. And frankly, I don't think he should be in Canton. What did this guy ever bring to the sport of football worthy? Like Jerry Jones, I'm not a big.
Did I say he went into the Hall of Fame? If I did,
no. He hasn't.
Okay.
He's been considered for it. But yeah. I guess I thought that's what you were referencing. Anyways, he's what did he ever do? It's crazy. Like Jerry Jones, Pat Bowlen, Robert Kraft, even, like, I can hear plenty of arguments for different owners being in the Hall of Fame for ways they've impacted the league. Art Modell impacted the league by getting in a tissy fit with Paul Brown, who I already outlined how iconic he was, that forced him out of football. He was only lured back because the NFL kind of gifted him an expansion franchise in the form of the Bengals. And then he welcomed to NFL fans all over the place the idea of paying for owner stadiums, and then those owners not having to give back to the community in any way with them. It's oh my God, he's does not deserve a spot in Canton. He's a bad dude, straight up. It's, oh my God, it drives me crazy.
I'm kind of interested because, like, as you highlighted, the media in different, depending on what city you were in, covered it in very different ways. And to an extent, I get that. But you would think that given the coast, what they had done to the city of Baltimore, they might have been a little more understanding of a city not all that far away who was going to lose their franchise. I think it is probably a testament to cognitive dissonance and a testament to the power of spin that they were able to put that aside. And Zach, maybe just to, what we've seen since, so certainly, the way in which it seems to be perceived is that kind of Art Modell and the NFL gifted the Browns' legacy to Cleveland. But from what I understand, it was essentially Art Modell was locked into such a deal with Cleveland that, you know, chances are this would have been very costly and very expensive. He would have eventually been able to move the team, but very likely he may well have been forced to play another 3 seasons in Cleveland before he had been able to do that. So is that the case? And if so, how skilled are the NFL in that they have been able to pitch this as something nice that Art and the league did for the city of Cleveland?
I think it once again demonstrates how great salespeople the NFL are. I mean, they're the best in the business. They've made a heck of a lot of money doing this this way for this reason. They know how to sell it to the audience. I mean, the whole concussion thing, I think, being a great example of how they can kind of sell things to the general public. And you're right, it wasn't just some nice NFL gift. It was won in a lawsuit. Well, actually, a settlement, I should say. So when Art Modell announces he's going to move the team, there's a lot of pushback. Drew Carey had a whole fundraiser. I think it was called Fan Jam. And they were trying to fight back against Art Modell's moving of the team. The city of Cleveland had a lawsuit against Art Modell, trying to argue pretty much what you outlined, Coleman. Now, I don't think the agreement was, I mean, I guess they were trying to argue there was an agreement. Now, whether or not there was, I don't know the specifics on the lawsuit, admittedly, but it was ultimately settled between the officials of Baltimore, Cleveland, Art Modell, and the NFL, this agreement, this compromise of sorts. And I think it's so, yeah, like it's not a sweet thing. You look at the legacy that the Browns keep, like that's great. You had a great team before 1995 and a lot of playoff trips, and you won your division a lot. You won some pre-Super Bowl championships and were in a lot of championship games. But ever since, guess what? They got an expansion franchise. And don't just look at the Browns. You know who the other expansion franchises were? Because I already mentioned them. The Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the losingest team of the 21st century. If it's not them, it's the Browns, right? It's one of those two. The Houston Texans, who have had some, I think, recent quarterback luck in the draft. But outside of that, they've had pretty poor franchise history. I don't think they've ever made it to a conference championship game. Same as the Browns, by the way. The Panthers are the only one of the bunch to ever appear in a Super Bowl. They've made it to 2, of course, losing both of those. But none of those teams has ever had a championship. The Ravens alone have 2 championships since that move. And what, 3 MVPs with a quarterback that hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, but it feels like one is inevitable. Like, I mean, I'm not a Cleveland Browns fan anymore, but when I was, if you put me back in,
kind of sounds like you are, but go ahead.
I've got a love for them, but they wronged me, man. They wronged me when they made that trade. But if I could travel back in time to 2021, and I'm a Browns fan, or 2020, I forget exactly what year the trade happened, but if I could travel back in time and you could tell me you can have the next 5 years of Ravens football as a Cleveland Brown, we'll give the franchise back. It's going to be Lamar Jackson in orange and brown, baby. And you can experience that. John Harbaugh's going to throw the hat on. He's wearing a Browns hat now. And you get that. And we erase the last 20 years. We give it to Baltimore. It's their franchise. Anyone in Cleveland would have taken that.
You'll take that.
We'll expunge the last 20. Give us nothing and just give us 20 to 25 of the Ravens legacy and getting to enjoy that. And anyone would take it. They got robbed. They got shot.
Out of every 100 Browns fans, how many became Ravens fans?
I would have to guess the numbers near 0.
Near 0.
I'm sure there's some because it's fairly regionally close. Like maybe there were some
of the players.
Yeah, and I'm sure players did, like Ozzie Newsome. I just talked about the 30th anniversary thing. Ozzie Newsome was on the sideline. He's a member of the Cleveland Browns Hall of Fame, and was like a great player too, like one of the greatest tight ends ever. Like imagine if Shannon Sharp was like the face of the Albuquerque Marauders or whatever after like they up and abandoned Denver, and like it would suck, it would hurt. And yeah, that's kind of, man, that's the he and other oh my god, he built the Ravens into what they were. He became their,
Exactly.
he was learning under Belichick on that Brown staff, and they wiped Modell wiped everyone out except for Newsom, and then Newsom right afterwards they get one of the best left tackles in NFL history, maybe the best middle linebacker in NFL history, the best safety in NFL history. I mean, it breaks my heart. It's such a crazy story. I there's a million bits. Art Modell and Paul Brown got into a fist fight at an NFL league meeting over Paul Brown stealing the Browns jerseys, because again the Bengals jerseys were identical except for the word Bengals on the side of the helmet. And Modell was upset, said screw you for stealing my jerseys. I don't think he said screw you, but screw you for stealing my jerseys. And Paul Brown said, who stole whose jerseys? They're called the Browns. And a fight broke out.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this team. We didn't even talk about Jim Brown. I mean, what a team, what a franchise.
I think you've shown your true colors, Brown. Column.
I think what was interesting, I suppose, is Zach, you mentioned Jim Brown there, because Jim came out at the time this was happening. When it was first mooted, and the Browns fans, I guess, were rallying to try to keep the team. Now, the city, the other interesting thing is the city did vote, and the people voted to implement or to continue with the syntax. They wanted it so badly, and Jim, he was with them, but he would say 20 years on that maybe it was time to get over it. When you look, Zach, at the fallout from it, do you think either the NFL or owners learned anything from it? Because we have seen teams move since. Or was this just rich people are going to do what rich people want to do, and to hell with the consequences, we'll live with it when they happen?
Oh, they learned something. I mean, they didn't have a moral lesson, if that's what you're trying to get at, but they learned something. They learned, oh, baby, we can make a lot more money now. Again, the overwhelming amount of stadiums that have been built since this 1995 move, overwhelming majority are with taxpayer money. And that wasn't this idea, how you outlined it before, Colm, I thought was so perfectly put, of publicly funded but privately profited or whatever. Like that was not the norm. Not that the Browns were the first ones to ever do it, they weren't, but it wasn't the norm. Ever since, it's been the overwhelming norm, to where Steve Ballmer buys or builds the Intuit Dome with his own money, and it's a huge news story. The Waltons do it with their own money, and it's a huge news story, when it probably shouldn't be. So I think they learned that. But in terms of the fallout, I mean, yeah, this is heartbreaking, and I would disagree with Jim Brown there about getting over. I think there's an idea that I do agree with about moving on and letting things go. But I mean, this is a death of something, a death of a family member, getting ripped, from the womb. And I get why Cleveland is still raw about it. And I think if anyone wants to look up that game, I forget who they played in the last game. But look up 1995 Browns, week 17, and it'll come up. And it is like the most emotional, or at least certainly one of the most emotional sports moments I've ever seen, where like you've got an entire city of people like bawling their eyes out, ripping the stadium apart so they can keep their seats, so they can keep whatever random keepsake. And you can still find this
sure.
stuff, like on eBay in Cleveland, just random. I have a cup holder from Cleveland Municipal Stadium, and it's all these fans they like zombies over a corpse. They just wanted they just grabbed whatever random bits they could. When the players went to say goodbye to the fans, because I think players largely sympathized with the fans. I mean, they had to uproot their entire families with this, which of course happens with a trade, but it's rare that an entire team, an entire coaching staff, every element is having to do it. And when they went and said farewell to the fans are pulling the tape off their fingers. They just did not want this team. Like, they were just holding on for dear life. And so I think there's some truth to what Jim Brown's saying, but like, this is a wrong that can't be righted. And you see Baltimoreans, to this day, getting to profit off of, or not even profit, like emotionally profit off of what should have been your joy. Baltimore should have Jimmy Haslam's shitty expansion team. Cleveland should have two-time MVP, 3-time first team All-Pro quarterback Lamar Jackson under center. Derrick Henry at running back. Baltimore should have well documented and alleged creep Deshaun Watson, and not Cleveland. And then I would have no problem being a Browns fan. I'd be so happy.
Well, what about Shedeur Sanders?
He didn't want to go, but he wouldn't be in. Actually, you're right, because he didn't want to back up Lamar.
He didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
So it even affected that.
You know what? It's worth it, Mike. You're right.
So I wonder how differently this would have been covered today. Certainly it would have been more hot takey, as all things are. In fact, this weekend I settled down. I didn't watch football here in the studio, but we did watch it in the living room. And so I had the big TV had on whatever, Red Zone or whatever when it was coming on, but I hadn't watched it in years, but I watched Sunday NFL Countdown on ESPN. So I used to watch that with, was it Chris Berman and Tom Jackson, right? That was their show. So we watched that, and it was unrecognizable as the same show. It was, so I do wonder how this would be covered now as opposed to back then. It certainly would have been covered more and more accessible. More people would know about it. So this is really fascinating, Zach, hearing some of this stuff. I guess Twitter would have been really handy back then. I mean, you think about the Raiders moved to Oakland. What you call them? You said that was 94, maybe 95. Mm-hmm. The Rams to St. Louis in 95. Cleveland, of course, to Baltimore. Houston Oilers to Tennessee, becoming the Titans a few years later, at least a couple 3 years later. They were still the Tennessee Oilers for a while.
They still rock the uniforms. Well, this year they announced they won't do that anymore, but that's
right. Yeah, that was weird. And then, of course, the Chargers to LA back in 2017. And then the latest is the Raiders to Vegas. But all these moves just kind of, people are like, whatever.
I was going to say,
it's not that same thing anymore.
I was going to say, if you were as you were talking about, what would how would it be covered today? I think we have a lot of examples, and I think it wouldn't have as much coverage. I wonder if more people would know about it. Maybe they'd have a passing knowledge of it, but like, you look at how Oakland has been screwed with the Raiders, with the Warriors, with the Athletics. Like, they've gotten the Browns ×3, man. And I mean, what are they getting? I've seen very little like national outcry. There's been some, especially in regards to the Athletics, because that owner's been so slimy. But like, the Raiders, I don't remember a lot of public outcry about that. And that was entirely, I mean, that's very analogous to the Brown situation. You're talking about a classic, like borderline Tiffany franchise. And why do they move? Because you've got a relatively speaking poor owner who is from a family that bought the team in like 1960 when it cost like $20 and isn't ready to really keep up. And as a result, they can't fund their own stadium like we're seeing the Waltons do. Turns to the city for this sweetheart deal. The city won't give it to them, and so they start seeking out what city will give it to me. Oh, Las Vegas will? Well, sweet. And look at Mark Davis. He's profited like crazy on it. This is the richest he's ever been as an owner, the best financial situation the Raiders have been in because of these shady deals he's cut. and it's only applauded. Hey, look at what he's doing with Tom Brady now, and they're doing all this shiny stuff. And it's all enabled largely because they screwed over the city of Oakland. So I think there'd be a lot of apathy, and I think people wouldn't care to the same level. Now, if it happened, if we're saying 1995 happened in 2025, where you didn't have this precedent, these were novel situations we were discussing, I think it would have been widely politicized. I don't know which side would have picked which side either, but I have a feeling that the concept of, these, it would either be framed as outrage fodder. Look at these billionaires, they're trying to raise taxes on you for their own profit, or right, how dare these governmental systems try and stop these successful businessmen from private citizens from trying to profit off their business. They need a stadium. Look at the Brown State. It's falling apart. You can't play football there. And they need a stadium, and Baltimore is willing to give them a stadium. Okay, Cleveland, it's time for Cleveland to step up if they want to do. I could see it framed either way by
all
either
those
side.
ways.
It's like, pick what, like, it's, I don't know. I'm not even trying to make it a political thing, but I just think it would be, we're talking about a lot of taxpayer money in a very visible forward facing sport. I think it would be turned into another political issue, and I think a major one. I mean, the NFL has only grown since 1995. It is like the cultural, look at the top 100 watched events of any year. It's like 95 are NFL games.
Sure.
Like even relative to college football, it dwarfs it. So I just even like, I think it would just be a big political issue, and maybe in that regard, it would be more cared of and get more coverage, and people would be more knowledgeable about it. But you would have half a side caring about it and half a side saying it was stupid and actively fighting against it and actively fighting for the Browns to be the Ravens, even if they didn't live in Baltimore. So
yeah, somebody would have been killed for it for sure.
Probably.
I think it's interesting, and we could probably go another hour to talk around this. And
I'm sorry,
I mean,
y'all.
what we're no, it's good. I mean, I think there's a really interesting conversation to have about the lessons that owners have learned and the way in which media ownership works, and the fact that the NFL owns a 10% stake in ESPN, and how ESPN covered this at the time, and would ESPN cover it in the same way now? And I mean, you only have to look at, say, the NBA stuff and how that's playing out with Pablo Torre and what he's doing and the investigative journalism he's doing, and the fact that there's kind of pushback or apathy. And I think
why are you trying to snitch on the owner? Why do you care?
I think it's interesting that we are having a show where we are endeavoring to pick at these things, at a time where a lot of it is probably getting shut down a little bit. But Zach, I think is there, as we probably move towards wrapping up, was there anything else you wanted to touch on around this story? Have we dug into what you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I guess my last thing, fans do have power and they do have a voice. The move out of Cleveland was only as painful as it was because of how hard the fans and the city fought. I think you see coaches fired or retained because of fan apathy or fan outcry. So even on smaller scale things, fans absolutely have power and absolutely have a voice. And I think it's important to remember that. I think the Broncos are getting a great deal. Obviously, we are all tied to the Broncos. I know this is more a national thing, but at the front of mind, the Broncos in the city of Denver are getting a pretty sweet deal with at least what's being sold to us at this point as a fully privately funded, ownership funded stadium. That's awesome. And I think as this project moves forward and as other projects move forward and other fan bases see this, demand that. I think it's one thing when Mark Davis is looking for a new stadium, if Mike Brown, the son of Paul Brown, is looking for a stadium, these are people. If the Packers need a new stadium, those are more complex situations. But if Stan Kroenke needs a new stadium, if the Waltons need a new stadium, if who's the guy you just bought, the Commanders? I'm spacing on his. If that guy needs a new stadium, well, he does. They're working on that right now. But all those should not be publicly funded. We're talking about people with hundreds of billions of dollars. I've always been sold on the idea of capitalism as, hey, these are the people that are taking the risks. They're taking the risks, and so that's why they get the profits. They're making the risk. They're gambling, so they gotta be the ones who make the profits, right? Okay, they're not gambling. The cities are. They're not putting any money down, or if they are, it's like a fraction. Okay, if they want to make all the profit, which they hey, pay for it, build it, make it your stadium. The idea that like, oh, I'd really like it if the city of Washington would gift me a free stadium, like, get out of here with that. And fans should like push back on that idea. Like, yes, this whole show might have been scary talking about the idea of relocation and how it is a possibility. The NFL does not want teams to relocate. Like, they wanted a team in LA, and so they kind of nudged that along, but they're not looking for any other teams to relocate. They want fan bases to be grown in their cities. They like the markets they have right now. They might expand, but I don't think they're looking for anyone to relocate. It's also a very difficult process to relocate. The Rams wanted to do it for like 15 years. It's a pain in the butt. Like, show some backbone, support politicians that will say like, no, screw these guys. This is nonsense. We're not giving them this BS deal. And fans, hold your ownership groups accountable. If an ownership group says we're doing blah, blah, blah funding plan, and fan outcry is loud and ridiculous and, all over the stadium at games, it'll throw a wrench into things. It might not ultimately stop it, but maybe you get a better split or whatever. And I think that's what I'd keep in mind. Reverse the precedent that Art Modell set. That is my closing statement.
Well, that was actually a fascinating little bit of Brown's history. I guess I just wish I could have you on every week to tear out and tear apart these stories, Zach, because nobody does it better than Zach Segars, iHeartRadio executive producer, co-founder, and senior editor at Let's Talk Broncos. Zach, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really, really appreciate it. It was a fascinating look into that story, and I know that Colin and I were really looking forward to it. So can't thank you enough, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me and humoring my scatterbrain nature about this topic. I felt very much like Charlie Day and Pepe Sylvia. So thank you guys for having me.
Okay. Colin, last words.
Mike and I will be back where this is the first of the Spin Zone Time Machine episodes. There will be others, not every week, or perhaps not every fortnight, but every so often we will delve into the vault to dig into some of the controversy of the past, and for most of those we will endeavor to get somebody on. Occasionally it will just be myself and Mike delving in, but hopefully we can get people the same quality as Zach to dig into those things with us. I think it's fun to look back. It meant that we got to see how things played out 3 decades ago. It's still, the media spin that we talked about there is still happening. As we are recording this, the NFL is pulling footage of the Eagles tush push from Twitter in an interesting move. So the NFL continues to give Mike and I fodder for future episodes, and we will be back with you in the not too distant future. So if you enjoy the podcast, please hit that subscribe button, rate, review, subscribe, or better yet, just tell a friend about Spin Zone, Power, PR, and the NFL.
We're out. See you next time, folks. Thanks for watching.